The last thing we've been doing is repairing the wind reservoir, which means gluing strips of leather onto the reservoir so that the wind is sealed inside and can't leak out.
Since you've been coming here for the last 12 years and fixing it, what kinds of changes have you or what have you made happen which was not happening before?
Well, it's been a complete rebuild. We brought this organ from England. We completely dismantled it, and we've put it completely back together again. So every last little bit of it has been taken apart and put back. And that is a very long job. But of course, Paul and I are only here for a few weeks every year. This time I've come for a month, but that's been the longest ever. So naturally that takes quite a few years, because I can only put in a couple of weeks of work at any one time.
So what do you do when you're not here fixing the organ in Sri Lanka?
I'm a Church of England priest in England, and most recently I was the head of school development for the Church of England nationally. So I had a kind of national officer job based in Church House in London, Westminster, and I worked there with the church nationally, and with the government, and with the other churches, and with other faith groups, and so on.
Right. David, they call Nuwara the Little England. But where in England do you stay in?
I live in the northeast of England now, which is very beautiful. It has moorland and mountains, not as high mountains as here though. But I'm not very far from the English Lake District, which is in the northwest of England. And the English Lake District is very similar in many ways to the area here, though of course you are much higher above sea level here. Nothing in England is as high above sea level as Nuwara. You are in the clouds as far as we're concerned.
In the clouds?
Yes.
Right. Well, David, if you could tell me a little bit about your thoughts as an Englishman who has been visiting Sri Lanka for a very long time, and also a person who's involved in the church. What have you observed?
Well, I've observed lots of things which I love very much. I mean, Sri Lanka, I think, is a wonderful place. There are wonderful people. Of course, there are troubles. We know that, don't we? But actually, Sri Lanka is really, really a wonderful place. So that's the first thing. And the second is that I've observed how very kind and hospitable everybody is. We've had tremendous hospitality here in Nuwara, down in Kandy and in Colombo, from friends in all parts of the country and in all walks of life. So that's very, very, very impressive. And also, the other thing which I like very much here is that both the Christian churches and the other faiths, the Muslims, the Buddhists, the Hindus, are all able to quite a good degree to work together. And I know, it's not always absolutely at one and not always completely united, certainly not, and there are of course bound to be disagreements, that's only right. But there's a very good set of relationships, and I've discovered people here from Buddhist tradition, from Muslim tradition, from Hindu tradition, from Christian tradition, working very, very closely together. And I admire that very, very much, and indeed have been trying to do a little bit like that in England, in some parts of England. Because for us in England, it is very interesting to observe a country here, in Sri Lanka, where both Islam and Christianity are minority religions. Christianity and Islam are not used to that. If we're mostly either a Muslim majority or a Christian majority, and we're not used to something like a Buddhist majority. So it's really, really a very good lesson to learn how things work here in Sri Lanka, where both Islam and Christianity are minority religions.
David, you say it's a lesson to learn, but ironically, do you think that this lesson is actually being learned as it happens in Sri Lanka by the people, or is it just, what is it?
Well, I think it's being learned more than people sometimes think. Because I know there are tensions between, because of the Tamil question, because of the Tamils in the northeast, and that gets linked to religious differences, and therefore your Buddhist friends here in Sri Lanka must feel it's difficult for them. It's very hard for them to manage those relationships. But I have met many people who value those relationships. And I've met, for example, Buddhist priests here in Sri Lanka who have been very open to talking to Christian priests, both your native Christian priests here and to a visitor like me. Very open, and have made us very welcome.
David, now you're a musician too.
Yes.
And how limited is your understanding of Sri Lankan music?
Oh, very limited.
How limited is it?
Very limited. I have two bits of understanding of Sri Lankan music. The first is that, 30 years ago, 25, 30 years ago, I used to run a big competitive festival on Eisteddfod in the northeast of England called the Cleveland International Eisteddfod. And the boys from Trinity College down in Kandy used to come every year for their Kandyan dancing. So I know a bit about Kandyan, particularly folk dancing and folk music from those days, a little bit. I've heard it, lots of it anyway. And then, of course, I have heard a lot of singing in the churches here in Sri Lanka while I've been here, not only in Nuwara but in Kandy and so on. And what shall I say about that? Well, in England, the Methodists sing, "Oh God, our help in ages past." The Anglicans sing, "Oh God, our help in ages past." You know what I mean? Well, in Sri Lanka, sometimes the hymn singing in the churches is a little bit too Anglican. It's a little bit too much, rather than, "Oh God, our help," and so on. You know what I mean. And one of the reasons that I've been so pleased to rebuild the organ here and in the Methodist Church in Kandy, and we're going to do some more organs over the next few years, one of the reasons I'm pleased to do that is because then it helps everybody to really sing out. So they sing the praises of God with their mouths wide open and really make a big sound to God, because the organ makes a big sound to God.
So what's your favorite instrument, musical?
Oh, the organ, of course.
How long have you been playing one?
Ever since I was a little boy. I began when I was 11 years old.
And was this at school? Where were you in school?
Yes, at school and at home, yes. I didn't go away to school. I simply went to the local secondary school near my home in South Wales, and we had a very fine music master, and he taught me to play the organ and, yes, all the rest of it, really. Very good.
What is the name of the school?
It was called King Henry VIII's Grammar School. You remember Henry VIII, the one with the 6 wives and to most of them?
And what happened? You said it was called. What happened to the school?
Well, it's still there, but it's now a comprehensive school. So when I went there were just over 200 pupils, all boys. Now it is a big school with, I think, 1,000 or 1,500 pupils, and both boys and girls.
Right. Is that school affiliated to any school in Sri Lanka yet?
No, not as far as I know. I must ask about that, mustn't I?
I'm sure it would be, it would be an experience.
Yes, it would. It would be a welcome experience both ways. Yes. I know there are links to and fro. Particularly some of your big schools, like Trinity, have links to schools in England, I think. But yes, it would be good to do that. Yes.